Big time fight coming up this weekend for the middleweight title. We have, is it the Moose? Is it the Dreamcatcher? Is it any different nickname? We're bridging onto Diego Sanchez territory, but we have Gegard Mousasi taking on John Salter. Matt, one of these men beat Mark Hunt at heavyweight, and it's the champion, the former champion, the current champion. It is Gegard Mousasi, and if you look at Mousasi's 5-on in, he beats Carvalho, which was a crazy win. He wins the belt. He beats Rory McDonald in that. Well, he's the 170 champ, and he's our biggest name, so let's have him fight Gegard Mousasi. And then he loses to Rafael Lovato Jr., and that's where it gets weird, because Lovato Jr. no longer able to compete. Hopefully he can come back at some point, but no longer able to compete. So Mousasi has to go out there and fight Lyoto Machida and beat him by split decision. I thought Lyoto won that fight, but then he fights Douglas Lima, and really, Mousasi looked good in the first 3 rounds, and then Lima started to come back a little bit. Well, now, because Bellator isn't like the UFC with interim title fights, they have Gegard Mousasi fighting the rightful guy that deserves the shot in John Salter. And John Salter has only lost 1 time with Bellator, and it was to Rafael Lovato Jr. rather. And that was a crazy back and forth fight where Lovato finally finishes him. But for John Salter, he's like to the nth degree a grappling specialist, and if you look at it in some of his fights after that, he beat Chidi Njokuani, he beat Costello Van Steenis, he beats Andrew Capel, a guy that a lot of people were excited about. We were wrong about him in his last fight because he won. We thought he was going to lose, but he won, and then he fights Salter. The craziest fight to me that Salter's had in all of Bellator is when he fought Costello Van Steenis, and you look at the way that he's lunging in for his takedowns to grab Van Steenis, you think, oh, well, this is easy. Van Steenis is that guy with Bellator. He's going to be a champ eventually. He grabs his hips, he just tears him down like the waves at the beach, crashes on him like they do every day, and John Salter kind of had his way in the grappling. So for John Salter, tried and true, he deserves this shot. I'm excited for this fight because sometimes Gegard beats guys like John Salter, and sometimes he struggles against them.
I rolled my eyes because I don't think you've agreed with a split decision ever, and you just always go with who lost. It's just the truth, but I had to call you out on it. John Salter, I'm going to sound like Doris Burke when she talks about Kevin Durant's jump shot. It's wet. John Salter's jiu-jitsu is wet. It is slick, and it's a joy to watch because John Salter's a really fun fighter. When you look at his, distribution of submissions, he can get it done in any way. He can attack your leg, body, head, arm, leg, just whatever. John Salter is that kind of a grappler, and you were right. He was one of those guys who, he did lunge for a lot of his takedowns, but the great thing about John Salter is that, okay, he started his game with just jiu-jitsu. Then he added MMA takedowns. Then he added the transition into MMA takedowns, and I do really feel like we're seeing a more defensive mind at John Salter, at least throughout this stage of his career. I know, listen, Gegard Mousasi is going to be able to jab him at long distance, because that's what Gegard Mousasi's been able to do throughout his entire career, but I do feel like at least this version of John Salter's not going to be exposed on the feet to the level that we've seen some other guys Gegard Mousasi's fought. If Gegard Mousasi's going to win this fight, I really do feel like it's going to be him defending a lot of takedowns, but it's going to be after John Salter tires is when he's going to get that finish on the feet. This is my whole point. I think John Salter can fight this fight like Anthony Smith fought John Jones. Anthony Smith fought John Jones not necessarily to win, but not to get finished throughout a lot of that fight. And I do think John Salter's key is the longer this fight goes, the easier it's going to be able to take down Gegard Mousasi. And I know Mousasi got stronger as the fight went on against Lovato Jr., but still, he had been taken down quite a bit in that fight, and Lovato Jr. had controlled him quite a bit on the mat. So I don't have any doubts that if John Salter can get top position on Gegard Mousasi, I think he will have success. I'm not going to say he's going to submit him, but I do think he'll be able to stay on top of him, similar to Jennifer Maia on top of Valentina Shevchenko, for instance. My issue really comes down to the takedowns of John Salter. Gegard Mousasi is really hard to take down. I know it's the weakness of his game if he does have any. Chris Weidman was able to take him down, Lovato Jr. was able to take him down, but I don't think Salter has the wrestling of Lovato Jr. Lovato Jr.'s jiu-jitsu is better than Salter's, and that's why he beat Salter, of course, but the real thing was that Lovato Jr. could take Salter down, and Salter couldn't take Lovato Jr. down. So every time they're starting a grappling sequence, Lovato Jr. is the one in the dominant position. And again, I know Rafa Lovato Jr. is arguably the best jiu-jitsu practitioner to ever go into MMA, so maybe it wouldn't have mattered no matter what his wrestling was. But again, that was really the key in that fight. So for me, John Salter's not a great striker. You are right. But again, I do feel like defensively he can at least stay somewhat sound enough so that Gegard Mousasi will be able to get off to a lead early on in this fight. But I honestly don't think we're going to see one of those fights where it's like, wow, John Salter's getting exposed early on. I do think we're going to see a lot of takedown attempts from him, and it might not look pretty, but I think Gegard Mousasi, if he can get past that first 2 rounds, I don't think Salter's going to have the explosiveness to take down a guy like Gegard Mousasi.
We threw this one out there in the YouTube community tab, so I want to bring this one up. We threw it right out before we taped these one. Only 5 responses. Mr. Face says, Money Mousasi all day, baby. You have an easy win for Geg. You also have Leonardo Maida Nunez. I had to respond to this one. You upset me because you said Mousasi. Never heard of the other guy. My response, he fought in the UFC 11 years ago. He fought Gerald Harrison, lost. Gerald got a raw deal in the UFC. He beat Jason McDonald. He lost to Dan Miller, brother of Jim.
You can forgive someone for not knowing who a guy who fought in the UFC 3 times 11 years ago
So
was.
here's the run. Here's the crazy thing. So he has those fights. He loses with XFC. He beats Fred Weaver, Jaime Jara, Dustin Jacoby, Brandon Halsey. Now, Jacoby and Halsey with Bellator. Claudio Anichiro.
He was that one too.
Apologize. Kendall Grove, Jason Radcliffe. He won 7 fights in a row. Lost to Lovato Jr. Now he's won 3 in a row. Capel, who, again, I slept on Capel. He had a fight against Anthony Smith eons ago, but the crazy thing was he beat King Mo and he finished him in the first round. That's what punched his ticket to John Salter, which is crazy. We both had
King Mo's not the same guy he used to be.
He beat Chidi and Njokuani. He beats Van Steenis. The Van Steenis wins holds a lot of water with me. Again, man, Salter with some of those takedown attempts. Van Steenis, I thought would have knocked him out the way that he did it because Van Steenis is such a polished kickboxer, but hey, John Salter, go to the well. He's the main guy at Gym O. You got the Barbarenas of the world. Impa Kasanganay used to be there. Their big guy right now is Joe Selecki. But if you have a look at the odds for this one, Gegard Mousasi open to minus 400. He's a minus 313. John Salter open to plus 300. He's a plus 239. Do we figure that the Tapology votes are close? I don't think they're going to be.
Probably not. Yeah.
688 total votes. 95% Mousasi. 45% by decision. 41% by knockout. Again, Mousasi's so crisp pumping that jab out there. How active can he be with his hips? Just like the Rory McDonald-Ray Cooper fight, even though Salter and Cooper aren't the same fighter.
Very different.
But how much can Mousasi deter the takedown attempts so that he can set up his own game? That's my question.
My question is Gegard Mousasi... Okay, Gegard Mousasi is past his prime. I don't think anybody's going to argue that with me. The guy's had 75 fights. He's definitely not on the front 9 of his career. The question is, how much past his prime do you think he is? Because if you think he's still near 100%, John Salter's got nothing for him, and I'm sorry. He is going to get jabbed up at distance. Salter's going to be shooting takedowns from a long ways away, and Gegard Mousasi's got a great plumb clinch on the inside, and I don't think John Salter's going to have much for him. I know I was selling some Wolf tickets, but let's just call it what it is. The problem is that Gegard Mousasi, after that Lovato Jr. fight, hasn't looked that good. Like, he didn't look good against Lyoto Machida. I thought he beat Machida, but still, it was way too close. It was closer than it should have been. And even his last time out against Douglas Lima, yeah, he looked good early on. He was getting offensive takedowns. But my issue with Gegard Mousasi was that he wasn't winning that fight. He was not losing that fight, and there is a difference between it. Everything Gegard Mousasi did throughout that fight was to put out the explosiveness of Douglas Lima. It was, I'm holding you against the cage, I'm keeping you on the ground, but it was never him being offensive with any of his techniques. It was solely him being defensive. So I don't know if Gegard Mousasi's figured, okay, after him breaking his orbital against your boy there,
Alexander Shlemenko.
Thank you, Alexander Shlemenko.
Lost that one.
And after the Lovato Jr. fight, I just don't know if he wants to take or have those stand-up wars like he used to. And that's an interesting thing, or it's an interesting, I guess, psychology that he has going into his fights. Because if he's fighting in a defensive way, and if he's fighting not to lose, John Salter's the kind of guy who can take advantage of that. And John Salter's the kind of guy who will take you down when you least expect it, and will choke you out, because that's the kind of jiu-jitsu ace he is on the mat. With Mousasi, again, I think he is past his prime, but I still think he's going to be good enough to beat John Salter. I think the takedown defense is still there. I think the striking offense is definitely there. But I do think Mousasi's time as being middleweight champion is going to be over soon. I don't know if Jason Jackson moves up in weight. I don't know who's next in line. But I do feel like we are seeing Gegard Mousasi kind of nearing the end of his run. Even look at the Douglas Lima fight. He was noticeably bigger than Douglas Lima. And I'm a guy who's long said that Douglas Lima could probably fight at middleweight. I was kind of proven wrong in that fight. Mousasi was the much bigger guy. When Lima landed on him, though, it hurt him. And that was the thing about Mousasi. He doesn't like getting hit. And I know people bring up Brock Lesnar all the time. Nobody likes getting hit. It's just some guys are kind of trained and they've been seasoned enough to where they don't react to it. Gegard Mousasi's not one of those guys. But I keep on coming back to, can John Salter take advantage of that hole in Gegard Mousasi's game? Probably not. If John Salter lands a jab on Mousasi, I don't think he's going to react so negatively that then it will open up a takedown or it'll open up a combination for John Salter. I think John Salter will be able to test Gegard Mousasi, but I don't think it's going to be enough to beat him.
I mean, you look at the middleweight division, I always thought that Tokov would probably be the guy. Is he in the rankings? Isn't he in the rankings? You got Vanderford, you got Van Steenis, you got Fabian Edwards, you got Big Johnny coming out of Florida, Johnny Eblin. He's a guy that you really have to watch out for.
Maybe Mousasi's going to be around longer than I thought. I don't think we're seeing Gegard Mousasi at the peak of his powers anymore. I really don't. And I do think that the Lovato Jr. fight started to show some of the holes in his game. Because going into that fight, Lovato Jr. is a good wrestler and good at jiu-jitsu. But like Gegard Mousasi's been around and he's fought guys like that before and beaten guys like that before. We're starting to see Gegard Mousasi think when he fights, I think. And I do think that's the big key. Where Gegard Mousasi's flowing, you were bringing up all his nicknames before. Gegard Mousasi to me is the underground king. Because he's fought all over the place. In the UFC, he never really got the shine.
Dream champ, Strikeforce champ.
Exactly. He's been around and he's done that. And I do feel like we're seeing him. He's not flowing as much as in his fights. It's okay. It's, I think, then I strike. I think, then I wrestle. And I think that once you start doing that, you're starting to slow down. It's kind of like Tyron Woodley in the later stage of his career. The difference is that Mousasi hasn't been able to fight the guys who've been able to take advantage of that yet. And unfortunately, I don't think Salter's going to be that guy, but I do think that person's coming soon.
If Salter wins, it's probably, I could see it being by finish.
Boom,
again, yeah, by submission, he gets the back. And he out wrestles Mousasi, and it's early.
It's hard to say that because Lovato Jr. was in some very dominant positions on Mousasi, and even he wasn't able to get the submission. So it is hard to say that Salter would be able to submit a guy like Mousasi when he's been in there with the likes of Jacare in the past. Like, he's been in there with some really, really high-level jiu-jitsu aces.
Mark Hunt of the world. But yeah, I like Mousasi in this fight as well. If John Salter wins, that'd be pretty cool. That'd be great. I mean, hey. One of us. Like, it'd be a great win there, but yeah, both of us going with the Netherlands' own Gegard Mousasi to get the win. Let us know down below in the comments section. Do you have the Underground King out of the heavier weight?
And he's younger than John Salter, which is the crazy thing.
Just turned 36, a fresh 36 for Gegard Mousasi. One of the most interesting interviews out there. He's got one with Karen Bryant that just dropped. He talked about the prevalence of leg kicks in MMA. I threw that one out there on Reddit. But for John Salter, again, just a guy that continues to win and is at the highest level. And if you haven't heard of him, it's a pleasure to go back and watch some John Salter films. So please do. But we both got Mousasi in this one. Make sure you check out the PFL playoff preview, as well as the rest for the main card of Bellator 264. You're not going to want to miss it. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. And check out our second channel, 15-minute card breaks. All sorts of great content over there. Again, keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. As we always say, let's get into it.